The Crypto Markets Update is brought to you by KuCoin, the best place to find the next crypto gem.
And as Christine said, the hodlers are hodling, but one of the biggest hodlers we know out there is Grayscale. So joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Grayscale Investments CEO, Michael Sonnenshein. Welcome, Michael.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. So yeah, as we were saying just now, Bitcoin hasn't worked as the safe haven over the past few days in the midst of this kind of a crisis. What's going on at the moment?
I think it's a little early to make that call. I know my team has historically looked at rising geopolitical tension and has really seen that it's not just been crypto, but other asset classes that have sold off. And historically, if we look back to Brexit, we saw the Chinese devaluation of the renminbi. These have actually been times when crypto and Bitcoin specifically have acted as a safe haven. But with the recent geopolitical tensions rising between Russia and Ukraine, I think a little early to make a judgment call.
Well, nonetheless, I mean, we saw gold, we saw oil. Those two assets are up over the past few days, specifically in many ways because of the geopolitical tension. So, I mean, is there more to Bitcoin than just these basic narratives of a hedge against inflation? Inflation's now at 7% and what have you, compared to a year ago when it was 1%, and the geopolitical aspects to it. I mean, is there more in the pricing than just these sort of narratives?
It's important that we all remember that the price of Bitcoin is not necessarily going to be a measure of the health of the crypto or Bitcoin ecosystem. For us and a lot of the investors we speak to, it really does come back to the philosophical difference between crypto, Bitcoin specifically, being a non-fiat asset, and really what that means as a departure from the fiat currencies that, very often in certain parts of the world are actually failing their citizens and, eroding their purchasing power. So we often come back to a lot of that narrative, particularly around times such as this.
So, Michael, of course, you're right. We don't know exactly what the long-term narrative will be, but I think it's fair to say that at least right now, today, Bitcoin is not acting like a safe haven asset, right? I think we can probably make that claim. And I was just wondering if you could tease out a little bit more the relationship between the cryptocurrency market and traditional assets, because they seem to be moving in tandem. And I'm just curious if you could break that down a little bit. Like, what do you think is happening? Is it that people are losing money in other markets and selling crypto, or I mean, what is the exact relationship here between crypto and the stock market? Like, who's sort of leading this?
Yeah, I think for most investors, they continue to look at crypto as a diversification tool as they build out a portfolio. Certainly, we've seen a lot of choppiness in a lot of asset classes to start the year. But what we tend to see, and given the 8 years of history that we have at Grayscale, we see these times when prices pull back, investors use them as opportunities to average down on their positions. And we actually end up coming out of these, not only making new all-time highs, uncertain what that time frame looks like, but also seeing that, to your guys' point, the true hodlers actually holding more coins on the other sides of these types of pullbacks in price.
Interesting. And you also have a bit of news at Grayscale. You're launching a campaign to encourage American investors to advocate for a spot Bitcoin ETF. We have here highlighted a comment by an investor saying, "It troubles me that Americans, particularly minorities such as myself and my family, are struggling with inflation, and yet we don't have these same opportunities that other countries have. Please approve this ETF," from Ann Ogu Liberty. So, Michael, maybe you could explain to us a bit about this campaign.
Thank you. Yeah, so today our team launched a campaign to educate investors around the regulatory process that allows them to participate in the SEC's decision around whether or not to approve GBTC to convert into an ETF. As you guys know, our team has been putting the full resources of our organization behind this initiative, dating all the way back to 2016. And while we have a great working relationship with the SEC, this campaign is really intended to educate investors that the SEC wants to hear from them. Investors have been very patient. They deserve a spot Bitcoin ETF, and they should not have hesitations or fears about writing into the SEC, stating the reasons why the SEC has not only created an unfair playing field, approving Bitcoin futures ETFs and not spot Bitcoin ETFs, but also how, in fact, the SEC may actually be failing to protect investors by not allowing products like this to approve, to convert into an ETF.
So Michael, some of the things that I've heard from people who are in the regulation industry, if you will, is that the SEC itself is still very concerned about manipulation in the spot market, particularly the potential for manipulation from countries that, I don't know, might invade neighbors or have invaded neighbors. So that's a reason why they're allegedly holding off on approving a cash-based ETF. The futures-based contracts that were approved by the CFTC used a very elegant, if interesting method by which they priced those contracts using U.S. exchanges that are regulated, et cetera. So what are you doing with this proposal, this ETF proposal, that would potentially allay the concerns of the SEC this time?
So that thinking, I have to say, feels fundamentally flawed. If the SEC's concern is over the underlying Bitcoin market, its pricing, its susceptibility to manipulation, or the lack of surveillance that they may want to see in that underlying market, the futures are a derivative of that spot market. And so if the SEC has gotten comfortable with an ETF that holds Bitcoin futures contracts that are in fact deriving their pricing from that underlying spot market, then they inherently should be comfortable approving a product that also derives their pricing from that underlying spot market. And so again, this campaign is really rooted in trying to level that playing field and also really helping to help investors advocate for themselves. Although again, our firm will continue to advocate for them until we eventually get this conversion completed for them.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, the Bitcoin futures ETF uses randomly chosen prices towards the end of the day to come up with the index by which they price those futures, and that's seen as a method by which it would be harder for somebody to manipulate, and especially if they're on U.S. exchanges. So it's like double protection. How are you pricing these ETFs at settlement? What kind of method are you using?
Well, we actually use the CoinDesk XBX index to price Bitcoin for the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And so we believe that it is the most representative index for establishing a Bitcoin price and ensuring that it is amalgamating pricing from several different exchanges to come up with a composite price and smooth out any type of anomalies that may occur in that spot market.